Hello everyone and welcome to Psychright. Today we're going to be discussing one fundamental aspect of biopsychology. This is the fight or flight response. So what is the fight or flight response? Essentially, it's a set of changes that occur within your body in response to a stressful situation. So for example, if I was running from a bear, my fight or flight response will kick in, lots of changes will happen, which will enable me to either fight the bear or run away from it as quickly as possible. So what we're going to talk through in today's episode is firstly, how does the fight or flight response come about? So what happens within your body to enable you to run quickly from that bear or be able to fight it? And secondly, why is the fight or flight response sometimes considered too simplistic? Why is it often not a generalizable response? And also, why might this be a product of evolution? Let's dive into this area one. The first thing that happens is that you need to perceive a stressful stimulus. So if you're walking through the woods, you need to see that bear coming towards you. Now once you see that bear, your amygdala, which is part of your limbic system, now let's remember what the limbic system is. The limbic system is a set of structures in your brain, subcortical structures, which regulate your emotions. So let's take a little detour here and just make sure we know what the limbic system is. Let's think of your brain like a box, a big cardboard box that's closed. Our cortex of our brain is like the big film that runs around it, so a big like cling film wrapper. You could think of this as the cardboard bit of the box. That's our cortex. Everything inside of the cortex, otherwise known as your subcortex, sub means under, inside. So everything inside your cortex is subcortical. Now your limbic system is a set of subcortical structures. One of these is the amygdala. Now the amygdala, once it notices this stressful stimulus, will send a signal to your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus will send a signal along your sympathomedullary pathway. Let's break that word down. You can call it the SAM pathway, S-A-M, in your exams. What is the SAM pathway? Let's take the first part, sympatho. What does that remind you of? When we talk about the nervous system, we talk about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, don't we? So the sympathomedullary pathway would refer to the sympathetic nervous system. And now, as you know, the sympathetic nervous system is involved in activating your fight or flight response. So one role of the sympathomedullary pathway is to initiate the action of your sympathetic nervous system. Now the other part of that word is medullary. What does medullary mean? Well, in your body, you have these things that sit above your kidneys called adrenal glands. And these adrenal glands are famous for producing adrenaline, as in the name. The central part of the adrenal gland is called the medulla. Now the medulla is the specific part of your adrenal gland which produces the adrenaline that we need in our fight or flight response. So when I say that the hypothalamus activates the sympathomedullary pathway, the SAM pathway, what I'm saying is it activates your sympathetic nervous system, which then activates your adrenal medulla. So what happens next? You've gone from seeing a stressful thing in your environment, you're then sending signals to your amygdala. Your amygdala then goes, oh, here's the hypothalamus, let me go and activate it. Your hypothalamus then goes, right, what's next? Let's go send the signal along the sympathomedullary pathway, which overall activates your adrenal medulla, the part responsible for the production of adrenaline. So that's exactly what happens next. Once your adrenal medulla is activated, it starts producing two hormones. It will produce adrenaline and also another hormone called noradrenaline. Now these two hormones have slightly different effects, but what we really need to know here for AO1 is a kind of a general list of effects that both adrenaline and noradrenaline have when they work together. They've got to travel through your blood, as hormones do, and you would have known this from your work on the endocrine system, and bind to receptors on your cells. So what happens? Your adrenaline is travelling through the blood, there's receptors on your cells, on your cell membranes. They bind together and they cause a lot of physiological changes. All these changes within the cell lead to effects, and a lot of these are very simple in that if you imagine a situation where you've been stressed, you will notice that your body puts in place a number of changes. One of these is pupil dilation. So your pupils will start to get bigger. Why? Well, firstly, that's because adrenaline and noradrenaline are working. Now, the point of making your pupils bigger is so that you can perceive more of your surroundings. So if you're running from a bear, you wouldn't want your vision to be obscured. You want better vision. You want to see more of your environment to make sure you don't trip or fall. So that's the reason why your pupils dilate, and that's one key effect of adrenaline and noradrenaline. Now, another one is an increase in your heart rate. So your heart noticeably will start pumping faster. So let's say you're watching a scary movie, you'll notice that your heart starts beating faster when you feel stressed. The reason for this is your heart is able to pump more oxygen around your body. Now, the benefit of this, if you have more oxygen in your body, more oxygen is going to your muscles. And if you have more oxygen in your muscles can work better. And if your muscles can work better, you can run faster from this bear that's chasing you down. So that's another effect. So we've got pupil dilation and increase in heart rate. Now, the other one I'd like you to know is inhibition of digestion. So inhibition essentially means stopping. When you're stressed, your digestion stops. This is because your body wants to conserve energy which it needs to perform vital actions. So for example, whether you digest that chicken nugget that you've eaten for lunch or not doesn't really matter when your main aim is staying alive, running from this bear. So your body's going to send all of your energy to your heart, to your arm muscles, to your leg muscles to make sure that you run faster. So in essence, what happens is a stressful stimulus is presented. This stimulus then leads to the activation of your amygdala, then your hypothalamus, then your sympathomedullary pathway, which activates your adrenal medulla. Your adrenal medulla then produces adrenaline and noradrenaline. And you can pause the video now and tell me a few effects that may result from the activation and binding into the receptors of adrenaline and noradrenaline. So let's evaluate. The fight or flight response can be too simplistic. What do I mean by that? Well, essentially, fight or flight is only really giving you two options. You can either fight that bear that's about to chase you down, or you can run from it, you can flight. But what if there's another option? Well, this guy called Gray in 1988 essentially found that in stressful situations, instead of fighting or flighting, mice would freeze. The reason they would freeze is to be hypervigilant. Now, what I mean by hypervigilant is being really, really aware of your surroundings, making sure nothing's coming to attack you. So when we talk about the fight or flight response, that may not necessarily apply to all organisms, and maybe even to humans. Because in some situations where we're stressed, we don't fight and we don't flight, we freeze. One way to counteract this argument is to say that Gray's study was done on mice. Now, the brains of mice and the brains of humans are very, very different. And can we generalize the findings of Gray to human beings? Not necessarily. Another difference was sex differences. So Taylor et al. In 2002 essentially found that while men tend to fight or flight, women tend to tend and befriend. So what this means is they make alliances with other women to ensure that their children, for example, are safe. So pause the video now and tell me, what kind of gender bias is this demonstrating? Is this alpha bias or beta bias? This is beta bias. This is because beta is to minimize the differences between men and women, and alpha is to exaggerate the differences between men and women. So the fight or flight theory, or the fight or flight mechanism, essentially says that it happens in men and women exactly the same. So it's minimizing the difference between the two. So if there are sex differences between men and women in this regard, then it means that those differences have been minimised when perhaps they shouldn't be. Perhaps there should be a distinct difference between how men and women react in the face of stressful situations. And this is what Taylor et al. In 2002 said. Now your final evaluation point here, and I'll get onto this in a later video, but I'd always recommend for 16-mark questions to do 3 evaluation paragraphs, is the fact that the fight or flight response is a result of an evolutionary hangover, i.e. it's something from evolution that's been carried through to today even though we might not need it. Another good example of this is your appendix. So your appendix serves no real purpose in your day-to-day life. However, because it's an evolutionary thing and we've had it for years and years and years, it's been carried through to today, even though it serves no proper benefit. And the same argument here can be made about the fight or flight response. We needed this response years and years ago when we were fighting off bears and fighting off cheetahs and fighting off other people in order to stay alive, to have food. But now, through the advent of technology and cities and civilization, maybe that's a response that we don't need as much. We're not often fighting predators. Therefore, this is also unable to explain how in modern day we deal with stressful situations, because necessarily it may not be the fight or flight response. Today we've discussed the AO1 and AO3 of the fight or flight response. The maximum they will ask you on this is to write a 16 marker. They may also get you to do an AO2 question, so an application of knowledge, where they ask you to apply your understanding of the fight or flight response to a particular scenario. So that's about it from me today, and I hope your revision goes well as we build up towards the end of the Easter break and towards our exams. Bye bye.